and then we'll go from there.
Cool.
All right, let me share my screen. Hopefully you guys can see that. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Good. All right, as Detective or Officer Bloodworth mentioned, I'm filling in for Niels, Dr. Rosenbaum, and those are some big shoes to fill, so please bear with me. He's obviously much smarter and more educated than me. I'm just a knuckle-dragging police officer, but we'll do our best. So the topic I've chosen because it sort of relates to what Chad Holland's going to talk about a little bit and has touched probably all of us in this career is law enforcement suicide and sort of the rising numbers that we're seeing across the country. Some particular departments more than others. A couple of departments back east have seen some significant increases in their officer suicides, including Chicago PD and New York PD. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this. I found this quote that says, when a police officer is killed, it's not an agency that loses an officer, it's an entire nation. And that was said by the founder of the Officer Down Memorial page. And for anybody in law enforcement, we sort of feel this quote, right? No matter where you're a cop, when you read about a police officer losing their life, whether it's to suicide or in the line of duty, when we read about that, you sort of feel like you lost a family member, right? And these are men and women that we have never met, that work in an agency or department, you know, thousands of miles away. And whenever I read about it, I still feel that, right? And because we do have this great family. And so I felt that quote really kind of summed up what I wanted to talk about today. And so here is the sad statistic that I was able to gather. 708 is the number of police suicides reported since 2016. Perhaps more concerning is that these have not been tracked until 2016, and these figures are not complete. Right? There are probably hundreds that go under the radar when it comes to police suicides. Some departments, you know, really do not treat police suicides like a line of duty death, and they really try to brush it under the rug or, you know, not bring attention to it. And so you can imagine that this number, as high as it is, doesn't tell the true story about what's going on with our officers out there. But what this number does tell us is that we lose more officers every year to suicide than we lose to bad guys. And that's the fact, regardless of how you look at the numbers, is that we lose more officers to suicide than we do to bad people every single year. And again, those numbers are going up. And just some demographics that I was able to put together. The average tour for an officer who takes their own life is about 15 years. It's right around the time where officers are starting to think about retirement, right around the time where officers' careers maybe get stale or stall, or all of that trauma and stress start to really add up in that officer's career. That's generally the time when it's the most dangerous for police officers taking their own life. This next statistic is not surprising. 95% used a firearm to complete a suicide. It's something that we have to be aware of because we all have access to that means, unlike perhaps other professions that we deal with. And then, you know, one of the more concerning statistics that I was able to find is that there was a 20% increase in law enforcement suicides from 2018 to 2019. And we do not yet have the numbers for 2020, but I'm sure that this trend continues. 2020 was a hard year for everybody, in particular folks like law enforcement, first responders, who were still having to go to work every day. We're still feeling that isolation as we all were. And so I suspect that number, once we get those figures in, will be high. And so some of the reasons why, when you look at the studies, just because you have an abnormally stressful job like law enforcement doesn't mean you get a pass on all of the stresses of just being a human being, right? You don't get the pass from your divorce issues and financial issues and kids and all of that stuff. That's in addition to the traumas and stresses that we experience at work. And when you read about officers' testimonials about, what had them thinking about contemplating suicide, it was usually a combination of non-work and work-related stuff. And stuff like divorce, it can really stress somebody's coping mechanisms who are already at max because of having a job in law enforcement. Nowadays, we were chatting a little bit about this earlier. There's this increasingly negative sentiment from the public towards police officers. I think someone mentioned when we were talking earlier, it's a really tough time to be a cop. The public, it's been increasingly negative. The media is increasingly scrutinizing us. I think about what these young men and women are out on the streets are risking, right? Even if they don't mess up, but it appears that they did to the untrained public, they have a chance of starting a riot in a different city or different part of the country. I mean, that's what's at stake here. That's an incredible amount of stress to be carrying around for these officers in law enforcement around the country. This is something, these next 3 points that I'll talk about are something that I think has gotten better, certainly since I started about 20 years ago, but it's still lacking, right? And a lot of police departments around the country, especially smaller departments, there's just inadequate mental health services available for the officers. There's not enough services, there's not enough training, there's not enough telling the officers, this is what you need to take care of and this is how you do it. And I've seen that come a long way here where I work, but I know it's certainly not the case everywhere. And this is something that I definitely experienced when I started, is that there's a stigma around seeking help for your mental health issues as a police officer. I think back to when I started, and it would have been a sign of weakness for me to go and say, hey, I need help. I'm struggling with this call. I can't get this call out of my head. I keep having nightmares. I'm not sleeping, right? That would have been a sign of weakness, I think, when I first started. And so there's this stigma that still exists. And, I think by everyone here on this network, you're addressing that issue right here, right? You're helping to destigmatize us talking about this kind of stuff and hopefully making it better and easier for the next generation of police officers to talk about this stuff. And to be honest, one of the things I appreciate about the millennial and now even the Gen Z generation of police officers is that they're a little more willing to take care of their mental health than perhaps someone like me is. And I can appreciate that. And then something that came up in my research and I think is a little bit overlooked is there are all kinds of physical health issues that are created by the job of being in law enforcement. And the fact is that your physical health affects your mental health and vice versa. There's just no way around it. They're connected, right? You can't have one without the other. So all these physical health stuff that comes from being police officers, bad lower backs and perhaps injuries on the job and all that stuff just makes your mental health worse. For people who are in constant pain, you guys know that's such a tough thing to live with, and it really can start to make your mental health deteriorate. And so that's kind of the bad news. And so I know I wanted to put some stuff on here about what we can do. And part of what we can do is what we're all doing right here on this network today. We're so lucky to have folks like Chad Holland and Mark DeBona and everybody who's presented on this network, because that's what we can do, right? The first thing is we can check on each other. I think being a good police partner is more than just protecting your partner from physical danger. We're really good at that, right? I would kick in a door, I'd run into gunfire. We'd all do that for each other. Let's do that for each other when it comes to our mental health as well. Sometimes all it takes is just saying something like, you don't seem like you've been yourself lately. What's going on, right? Just ask the question, start that conversation, check on each other. The second one is exactly what we're doing today. Talk about it. Talk to each other, talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to the Scion network, to your mental health professionals. Sharing your stories is therapy. It's therapy for the people listening. It's therapy for you who are sharing your story, right? Hearing that what you experienced is the same as what someone else did, there's a lot of therapy in and of itself when you hear that. So it's important that we talk about it. And then the third, just take care of yourselves, right? If you need a mental health checkup, go get it. If you need medications, don't be afraid of them. Stay physically healthy. Make sure you guys are enjoying your activities outside of law enforcement. That's really hard for younger officers because, you know, it's really fun. You're running lights and sirens everywhere. Everybody you know is a cop. But keep those friends and family outside of work. Keep those hobbies, and always make sure to make time for your friends and family. You're going to end up having to skip a lot of holidays and birthdays, but make sure you're making up that time when you can. Friends and family are important. I think that's all I had. Wanted to make that short and sweet, but I'm happy to answer any questions you guys had about that.